If I had to say just one practice that would be the best thing you could do for your diet, it would be eat plenty of vegetables.
Bruno is a professor emeritus of nutraceutical science with Huntington University. It's the University of Health Sciences. Currently, he serves as Chief Scientific Officer of Nutriland USA, Inc., with graduate degrees in nutrition and herbal medicine, and as a 44-year veteran of the dietary supplement industry, as well as an award-winning formulator. He has developed natural products for dozens of dietary supplement companies, educated and trained natural product retailers and healthcare professionals, and written articles on nutrition, herbal medicine, nutraceuticals, and integrative health issues for trade, consumer, and peer-reviewed publications, as well as authoring book and textbook chapters.
In its strictest form, the definition of natural is that nutrient is present in that food or that plant, and you're extracting it, and so it's from that natural source. But let's be frank, I'm going to say something that a lot of people probably want to shoot me when I say it because they don't want people to know. Basically,
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Welcome to the next talk on the Uncovering the Secrets of Longevity, Live Beyond the Norms Health Summit. If you know my story, there was a 4-year period where my business partner and I did not want to get into the supplement business. During that 4-year period, I found a peer-reviewed published paper that supported that decision. And that paper, again peer-reviewed, said that 50% of the supplements on the market that they had tested for that paper did not have in them what they said they have in them. I don't remember the exact details, but maybe this isn't as bad as it sounds. Maybe it just means, hey, a 1 gram tablet of vitamin C only had 0.95 grams. But the flip side is that it can be much worse, with some supplements containing dangerous prescription medications not listed on the label. Now that we have entered the supplement space, it is my intent to keep as many people as safe as possible, and this next speaker is going to help us navigate that space. I met Gene at the recent Supply Side West. It's a conference really about nutrients and ingredients, nutrition, and I was visiting him speaking about the predicament that NMN is in right now. And in his talk, he talked about how spermidine, which is found in a product that Nutriland makes, checks the legitimacy boxes a supplement needs to as it relates to hair growth. When I realized his real background, I thought I have to have him on this longevity summit, so I invited him. So let me give you some details about Gene. Bruno is a professor emeritus of nutraceutical science with Huntington University. It's the University of Health Sciences. Currently, he serves as Chief Scientific Officer of Nutriland USA, Inc., with graduate degrees in nutrition and herbal medicine, and as a 44-year veteran of the dietary supplement industry, as well as an award-winning formulator. He has developed natural products for dozens of dietary supplement companies, educated and trained natural product retailers and healthcare professionals, and written articles on nutrition, herbal medicine, nutraceuticals, and integrative health issues for trade, consumer, and peer-reviewed publications, as well as authoring book and textbook chapters. Gene, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks. I am really excited to be here. I enjoyed our conversation at Supply Side West, and I'm happy to be picking it up again today.
Right where we left off, and in a different direction. I'm pretty excited about this. So can you give us a little bit of background? How did you come to study nutrition and herbal medicine? And maybe a little background of how you ended up with, through the career up to Nutriland USA.
Sure. So back in the 50s, even before I was born, my grandmother was diagnosed with a kind of cancer called lymphosarcoma. Back then, they did not have any kind of radiation or chemotherapy. They had surgery. They cut it out. If it came back, they cut it out again. And if that didn't work, they told the patient to go home and get their affairs in order. And that's exactly what they did with my grandmother. But instead, she sought out treatment by a fellow named Dr. Max Gerson. He was an MD with a therapy that included an organic diet, organic juices, detoxification methods, and some supplements that were available at the time. Basically, Dr. Gerson believed that a person could be cured of degenerative illness by means of detoxification and building up the immune system. So, long story short, my grandmother got well. And when she passed away years later, it wasn't from a degenerative disease. I personally was always fascinated by my grandmother's story, and I wanted to know more about how therapies like the Gerson therapy were able to help so many people. So I studied to earn undergraduate and graduate degrees in nutrition and herbal medicine, and basically dedicated my professional life to helping develop products that can make a major impact on people's health. Now, with regard to Nutriland USA, I went to work for this company as Chief Scientific Officer fairly recently, in June of this year. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, I worked with a contract manufacturer, and I formulated products for different brand owners, as well as teaching and writing about nutraceutical science. When that manufacturer closed, I was approached by Sanying Xu, the president of Nutriland. I really liked Nutriland's nutraceuticals. I like the research supporting them. I like Nutriland's philosophy regarding sustainability. And I also like the people who were part of the team. So consequently, it wasn't a difficult decision for me when I was offered the position.
Excellent. And I met a number of the team at that event at your talk, and I can see why you're very comfortable there. So a lot of things you do these days, and maybe quite some time throughout your career, involves writing. What are the different types of writing that you do typically?
So I do a lot of different kinds of writing. So one of the kinds that I'm doing more of recently, although I've certainly done it a lot in the past, is writing white papers. What that means is, for Nutriland, I'll take one of the nutraceuticals that is sold, and I'll do a very deep dive, looking into all the research and everything that I can possibly find out about it. And I write a white paper giving the results of all of my research, what it is, what the background is in terms of, its market space within the industry, looking at research, preclinical research, looking at human clinical research, looking at all aspects of what that material is, and producing and then putting together structure function claims that can be used. And so it becomes a kind of dossier for a brand owner who wants to use the supplement, gives them everything they need with all the scientific references and all of that. But beyond that, throughout my 44 years in the business, I've written a lot of articles on nutraceutical science for trade publications such as Vitamin Retailer, Nutritional Outlook, as well as for scientific journals. I've been involved in a number of human clinical studies, and also in just writing scientific reviews. And so those have been published in peer-reviewed journals. I've also written more in the past than current, a lot of articles for consumer publications. I've written a number of books about nutraceuticals, and I was pleased to be asked to write some chapters for nutraceutical textbooks as well. And lately, in the past maybe 5 years, I've done a lot of blog writing. And currently, I frequently post a lot of articles on LinkedIn as well, which is a great place to post articles. One thing that all of my writing has in common is that I cite the scientific references that support the topic I'm writing about. Mm-hmm. Way too often, I see articles being written where the author doesn't provide any scientific references. So it's hard to know if the information in the article is just the author's opinion or if there is any hard science behind it. And I think it's really important to let people know the difference between information being presented that's strictly an opinion and information that actually has science to support it.
Well, you're also probably the guy who periodically will spot check the references that are mentioned when they're there to dig a little bit deeper and kind of confirm some information.
Frequently I do that. My own sister had given me a brochure by somebody, a healthcare professional, who wrote some stuff about their opinions on some health topics. And at the end, it didn't actually, it gave a bibliography. It didn't say okay, didn't have a citation within the text that said, here's what I'm saying, and that's a result of this study. It just gave general bibliography. So I went in, I pulled those citations, which were not really done correctly, but I was able to find them. And like the first three were a citation of the guy who wrote the brochure, quoting himself in some opinion papers that weren't science, and then others that had absolutely nothing to do with the topic at hand, but they must have looked good, so we just tossed them in for good measure. So yeah, it's really important to check the references.
You think about the what people will often say about, testimonials and their anecdotes, and you got to be really careful, and it's probably the lowest measure. Maybe you just came up with the actual lowest measure of scientific integrity, which is when you're referencing your own blog and both of them have no references.
Right.
Maybe that's below anecdotal input.
Absolutely.
In the talk that I saw, you mentioned a specific criteria for products or ingredients really to be accepted. And I think it was like 2 peer-reviewed articles. Which groups kind of require this? Which groups might not require this? Is this something that you require for any supplements that you might consider taking?
Yeah, I remember talking about this. What I was specifically making reference to is some of the retailers, such as Whole Foods Market and natural grocers, that require any structure function claims on the label to have 2 randomized controlled trials to support each of the claims. Okay, now that doesn't mean that the retailer won't accept the product in the store without those 2 studies. It just means that they won't accept the product if there are label claims without the 2 studies to validate the claims. Now, some independent stores likewise have strict requirements of this type. Others, like Vitamin Shop or GNC, they're less demanding, although they do like to see some studies to support product claims. And I say, good for them. I say good for demanding some evidence and not just taking something in because it's the flavor of the month on somebody's blog or, whatever.
Somebody's blog who references his other blog.
Yeah, exactly. Now, as far as myself, when I personally take a supplement, I like to see that there are double-blind, placebo-controlled trials demonstrating the efficacy of the nutraceuticals that it contains. Look, I'm a scientist, so there needs to be science to support the use of supplements. What's interesting is that sometimes when people find out what I do for a living, it isn't unusual for them to say to me, so, do you believe in vitamins? And my response is always, no, I don't believe in vitamins. Belief is something that's good for religion and philosophy. When it comes to vitamins, there is either scientific data to support it or there isn't. There are many supplements I use because the data supports the purpose for which I'm using them. And for me, that's what it's about. I don't ever use a product simply because somebody goes, oh, I used it and it worked great for me. Because you know what? You can find a number of people who have used it and didn't work great for them. So that testimonials are not the basis on which to draw conclusions.
And with that, so like Whole Foods would require, is it as stringent as a double-blind placebo-controlled?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is
so
the criteria.
So they want 2 randomized controlled trials, which basically mean 2 double-blind placebo-controlled trials, randomized. If you have 1 randomized controlled trial and then maybe 1 open-label trial, that's not 2 randomized controlled trials. That's still good, but it's not. It doesn't meet their specific requirement. So there you go.
Okay. So in my opening, I mentioned a study where 50% of the supplements tested, and I don't have the details on it, but I just remember that impacting me. And actually, it pushed my business partner and I to not get into the supplement business for like another 2.5 years, even though we've got, customers knocking down the door, not just knocking on the door, knocking down the door. It was a little crazy. Does that surprise you? Does that study, other than the fact that I don't have the reference for it?
So I'm going to answer this question. And I'm going to answer this question by prefacing that in my career, in addition to the science part of what I do in formulating, I've also been in charge of labs at facilities where we had to test nutraceuticals, raw materials that came in, test the finished product, and make sure it had in it what it was supposed to have. And what a lot of people don't understand is there are methodologies that are extremely important when it comes to testing. When I hear about a study such as what you mentioned, I ask the question, what were the testing methods used? Now, this is vital for accurate results, even more so than might be obvious. For example, let's say a product is being tested for its beta-carotene content. If microencapsulated beadlets of beta-carotene are used, which are often done, then that means that the component beadlets have to undergo a single wash, a double wash, and a triple wash just to get the coating off of them. If the coating is on them, you can test it until the cows come home and you're not going to see it. You got to get the coating off of it completely before you can test it and actually see what's in there. So I always ask, did the labs testing the product for the study, did they do that? There's so many variables when it comes to testing that it's hard for me to take these studies at face value. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't brand owners out there who are irresponsible and who don't make product quality a top priority. There certainly are. At the same time, there's many excellent supplement companies who do make it a priority. And I have personally been involved in a situation where one of the services out there that's sold to industry a lot and subscription, and they'll test and say, oh, look, we tested this product, it didn't have it in there. However, if you pay for their service in advance, you get warning in advance, you can correct it. And so you're never shown as a company that didn't have something tested. But I've looked at one of those where they did that with ours, and I went in and I followed up and I said, what was your testing methodology? No, that's the wrong test. Because of this and this, it won't show up. You have to use this test. So you either use the correct test or you take those results off, because we're going to go after you. Our lawyers are going to go after you because you did it wrong and you're misrepresenting this. And they took it off.
So go ahead.
So the issue is, does it surprise me to hear that? Doesn't surprise me at all. I don't know if the reason is because they didn't test it correctly or because there's a lot of shysters out there, or both.
So there's absolutely no surprise because you can barely test. I mean, we bumped into this, when we get our gel caps made, it's a GMP environment. And so they have to test that, our product has certain things. And actually I have two stories here, and like, they don't know how to test for our product. ESS 60 is not something that people know how to test for. And so like, what is there really is basically a loop that you have to figure out how to go through. So that's interesting. And we are also aware, this is just a kind of comment on GMP. We're aware of somebody who's actually in the C60 space. We consider that really industrial. We know that they have no C60 in their product. And they're manufactured at a GMP facility, because remember, GMP is about processes, and the test doesn't have to be the right test to actually prove that you have the right thing in it, disappointingly. So your first, I don't know if you have any comments there. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a comment.
Yeah.
The GMPs as they currently stand.
By the way, this is good manufacturing process or principles or procedures. One of those.
Good manufacturing practices, and CGMP is current good manufacturing practice. And the good manufacturing practices are the GMPs are pretty clear. It doesn't mean everybody always follows them as they should. If you list something on a label, you have to, if challenged, be able to prove that you have that material at the level indicated on the label. Now, the GMPs do cover this, but a lot of times in the industry, that doesn't always happen because people don't want to put the additional expense into the testing. And sometimes it can be difficult. Testing, you can get interferences with other things, and so people just often take the path of least resistance and don't. But many good supplement companies do the testing, are able to demonstrate that it's there. And nowadays there are some retailers that even require that. So I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah. I think this goes to, they've got a GMP certification, and really the person certifying them, or, that has some of its own self-declaration, right? The person certifying them doesn't know how to test it, right? And just has to rely on them as the manufacturer of this unique molecule to say, like, oh, so if you're saying it's in there, like, I'm believing that it's in there. And that's happens not to be what's going on.
So even with that, there may not be an established testing methodology for a given nutraceutical, but a testing methodology can be created. And sometimes the raw material supplier themselves will work with a lab to create that testing methodology. And then they'll share that information with other labs. Here's how you do it. Here's how you test. Here's the standard you use, and so forth. And other times it's not. And then when that happens, they generally rely on what's called input, meaning I put it in there. But then you have to have backup documentation, like batch records showing that somebody actually measured it, put that amount in there, signed off on it. Not as good as being tested, but a whole lot better than doing nothing.
Yeah. And I think the point is GMP is really is the only way you should be manufacturing anything, like, period. If you're not, from a conceptual standpoint following GMP, whether you've got all the T's crossed and the I's dotted, okay, that could be a different story. But conceptually, it's the only way to manufacture it, in my opinion. So I want to go back to this question of 50% of supplements. I want to break it down into two questions. The first question, are you surprised? No, because maybe they don't know how to test it. So this could be a flaw in the actual publication. Maybe if you were the peer reviewer, you would have called them on it. The next one is, let's assume that they did the testing exactly right. And let's assume that they still got 50% of the supplements that they tested did not have in them what they say they had in them. What's your reaction there? Because I think those are two, maybe you're really surprised. Right. Maybe you're not surprised.
Assuming that testing methodology was correct, then I would be, depending upon, so if I saw a list of the supplement and the supplement brands, and you said, of these supplement brands and the specific supplements, I want you to give me a guess as to which of them are the 50% that wasn't tested. I bet you I'd get pretty close to guessing it correctly. After all the time I've been in the business, I'm familiar with many brands. I'm familiar with how a lot of them do business. A lot of them do their testing. And so if I know the brand, I'll say, oh, they do things right. And that one, not so much, or that one I've never even heard of. And so as a result, certainly that could be the case. You could find ones that just aren't doing what they're supposed to do. And as a result, they're not testing out right. It's about the brand and their integrity.
So what I'm hearing is a person with 44 years of experience in this industry wouldn't exactly be surprised, even giving proper testing, that 50% of supplements that were tested. And this can certainly be nuanced, right? Like if you only looked at one thing that's extremely hard to make, maybe that has an impact. If you're looking at, there's all sorts of variables here, but you went straight to you could identify the companies, which means you wouldn't be that surprised if this came out and it was a legitimate study. So I think that's more, unless you want to clean that up.
No,
I don't want to put words
That's fine. I've seen similar type studies in the past where a whole bunch of products were tested, and a number of them were from the same brand, and all of those ones from that brand failed. So it's like, yeah. So if you did, let's say, tested 100 products, and 50 of them were from the same brand. Yeah, 50% failed.
There's your 50%. Yeah, potentially. I also wanted to go back. You mentioned structure function claims, and I think that's worth defining a little bit better, right? Yeah. I've been reading enough. I have, even as much as I've read about it, I think I have a pretty good idea and still get tripped up. People are like, you got to be careful there. Can you talk about what a structure function claim is, and maybe a little bit where it can go awry, and then where it needs to land properly?
Sure. Structure function claims, as the name suggests, are the role that a given dietary ingredient is the correct term. That term was established in the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. And a lot of times people will say nutritional supplements, but the correct term is dietary supplements. Because with dietary supplements, it opens it up much broader to a lot of things. An herb is not a nutrient, all right? An amino acid is not a nutrient. Protein is, et cetera, et cetera. So it opens it up to many things. So what happens here is that, do me a favor, ask the question one more time, because I want to make sure I'm going down the right path.
Yeah, so it's you think about structure function claim, and it's interesting because the word structure is so easy and the word function is so easy. You would think like the random English speaker would go like, I understand that, and I don't think that's true. So it needs more.
So structure function. So let me give you an example. A structure claim is the role of any given dietary ingredient in the structure of the human body. So, for example, calcium is required to build strong bones. Calcium is required as part of your bones. That's a structure claim. That's basic. We know that. Calcium is a part of the structure of the body. Function. Vitamin C is required to support immune function. All right? So it's not necessarily needed to support a structure, but a function of the body. All right? Now, in addition to your standard structure function claims of the type I've just mentioned, there are some out there, and these that are considered structure function, but you can go awry on these if you're not careful. So back in the beginning, claims were being made for products that addressed menopausal symptoms. Mm-hmm. Okay? And the position of industry was, we're talking about functions in the human body. And the FDA said, no, that's a disease state. And they lost the battle because they're wrong. It's not a disease state. It's a natural process in the body. So therefore, it was possible to make claims about some nutraceuticals helping to reduce the incidence of hot flashes, for example. Okay? But you have to be so careful. Another area would be like, if just from the standpoint of, is it a function claim? Yes. Is it a allowed a function claim? No. Would be this herb helps reduce inflammation. Is that a structure claim? No. Is it a function claim? Sure. But the FDA in the preamble to DSHEA gave that as an example of what not to do, because there's not enough information there. That could be part of a disease process. If it's part of a disease process, dietary supplements are supposed to help keep healthy people healthy, not treat disease, even though people use it for that. And so in that situation, you would have, and so people thought they could get around it by saying, well, it supports a healthy inflammatory process. And that was going on for years. And the FDA came back and said, no, because that healthy inflammatory process could be part of a disease process. Okay, so how could it be used? Well, they came back and they're like, let's say you're over-exercising, and now you have some inflammation due to that. And this dietary ingredient can help reduce inflammation associated with over-exercising. Aha! Now we have a way in which we can use it. So you can get tripped up if you don't do it the right way. If you just you leave out a modifier, you leave out a qualifier, or you just overstep your bounds a bit. So there you go.
You kicked in one that I use regularly. So I go on podcasts and talk about our product, and like, hey, we took the box of antioxidants and inflammation, and let me put this caveat: we're allowed to say, the FDA allows us to say, that it addresses inflammation related to exercise-induced inflammation. It doesn't allow us to say that we address any other type of inflammation, because they've equated those to medical diseases. And so that is one that I honed in on. It was arduous to get to it, right? And then we finally get there. So I think that's pretty awesome. All right, so we have this understanding of what the FDA's looking at. Now, you mentioned the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, right? Passed in 1994. If I did my math right, you were already working in the industry for about 10 years at that point. That had to be a very interesting, like, one, it feels very dramatic looking back at it, right? But you wake up the day after it's passed, and really nothing's changed the next day, right? Everything is supposed to have changed and things start changing. But talk about what it was like before, and then going into it, and
Oh,
then
sure.
coming out on the backside of it.
So, Chris, yeah, not only are you correct, but I was actually in the industry 15 years
15,
before.
yeah.
And so I'm actually been around long enough to remember the passage of the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act prior to the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. And, I was actively involved. The company I worked for was actively involved in getting retailers to sign petitions to move forward with the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. It was a big thing in the industry. The industry was fighting for this. Luckily, we had some good people in Congress on both sides of the aisle who helped get this thing through. And it was a major, major accomplishment. It had DSHEA, short for Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act,
Mm-hmm.
changed many things in the industry. First and foremost, it gave a legal definition to the term dietary supplement. That may not sound like a big deal, but it is a big deal because all kinds of dietary ingredients, nutraceuticals, herbs, metabolites, different things could now all be in a dietary supplement. Where before, it couldn't actually, people may have put it in there, but it was a legal no man's land because it wasn't actually allowed. Now it suddenly became allowed.
It wasn't
Shame.
explicitly allowed, right? Like, so it wasn't because it wasn't explicitly allowed, you could be
That's
called
right.
on it or whatever.
You could absolutely be called on it, and people were from time to time, and sometimes shouldn't be. But yeah, so that was one thing that happened. And then it established the ability to do structure function claims, the meat and potatoes of claims. There's other kinds of claims. There are health claims, which are very, very specific. There are nutrient content claims. There's different kinds of claims, but the meat and potato of claims for supplements is the structure function claim. And that's the thing that tells people really what they want to know to help them make a decision on, is this the right product for them? So, and it's not just about wording it in a way that's appropriate, like, oh, well, over-exercising for inflammation. It's also about being able to support that structure function claim. So you need to say it legally, and you also need to have data to support it. And so those are the two things. But still, that was a big accomplishment. And then just the GMPs. It established a whole new level of quality assurance for dietary supplements. And so whether or not everybody always follows it, we now have an actual legal precedent saying this is how it is to be done. This is how you're supposed to be done. And if you don't, and the FDA goes after you, they have all the grounds to go after you, and you got nothing because you didn't follow the GMPs. So that's very important. There's many other things that the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act did. I think it created more legitimacy for the industry. Overall, I'd say it really helped steer the industry in a positive direction.
Were there any kind of casualties, and casualties implies like potentially implies like that they didn't deserve it, but like when that act came out, there were some pretty early on targets of companies that were like, great, we get to shut down this company because it's just not acting morally, and now we have the legal precedent or the legal signature to go after them.
DSHEA and the and I should make this very clear. DSHEA was passed in 1994. It wasn't until 2001 that all of the regulations associated with DSHEA actually were finalized. Okay. And so once that happened, that became kind of the game changer. And as a result of DSHEA, were there companies that were casualties? I would say there are companies that were deservedly hit, and we're doing things wrong. We're doing things in an irresponsible way. And DSHEA helped to clean up that mess. Because when anybody in the industry does something bad, it reflects on the industry as a whole. And so I'm all for cleaning up the bad players and getting rid of them. So those who are legitimate are still around, and you don't have that same negative association. So yeah, certainly there were some, but it was very few, really.
So yeah, I'm with you, and that goes to like, let's clean it up. It goes to labeling, it goes to claims and marketing, it goes to
Absolutely.
ingredients, it goes to all of these things. I think that really is important that somebody can pick up a label and trust that what it says on the label.
Oh,
And maybe the hardest thing right now is the marketing because of web pages and how transient they can be, et cetera.
yeah. You mentioned labeling. One of the things I wanted to mention that I left out was it also changed how you can present a nutrient. So, for example, before you might have been able to just say calcium carbonate, 1,000 milligrams. And somebody looking at that think, oh, wow, this gives me 1,000 milligrams of calcium. No, it doesn't. It gives you 1,000 milligrams of calcium carbonate. 39% of that calcium carbonate is calcium. So out of that 1,000 milligrams, you're getting 390 milligrams. Right? And so it changed. So like, no, you have to list it by the actual elemental nutrient. You also can't use confusing names to make it sound like something exotic. You have to use standardized common names so that people can read it and understand what they're actually getting. So those were some things that some people in the industry didn't like, but I think it was a good move forward to help people understand what they're actually getting.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if they actually are getting what they think they're getting is
Yeah.
one step deeper, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, like if you might have a list of manufacturers and that you could probably identify the ones that didn't cut the mustard in the 50% don't have in them what they say they have in them. How would you tell, right? So you've got a different perspective. So anything that you would add that you might say, from your 44 years of experience, potentially even working with some of these, not asking you to call out names, but then also like, what do we do, right? Like we're consumers and we don't have this 44 years of experience in the industry. How do you tell a good supplement product from one that's not so good?
There isn't a single easy answer to that, but I'll give you some bullet points because it can be a challenge. So again, like I say, for myself, I could pick up a product, look at the label, and see if they're even following the regulations. And if they're all over the place, I won't even touch it because that tells me their quality control, their quality assurance is crap. But let's start here. Let's say be an educated consumer. That would be my first thing. So let's say you're going to go, you know what? I'm a man and I want an herb to help me with prostate health. And I understand that saw palmetto is a good herb. Great. Look it up. See what you can find about it. See what the form that was used and the doses that were used. If you do that, you're going to find, 320 milligrams of a saw palmetto extract, standardized for 80 to 90% fatty acids. It's what's been used in so much of the research out there. That's the amount. That's what I need. And if you pick up a product and it says saw palmetto, 400 milligrams of saw palmetto powder. Oh, it's not the extract. It sounds better because it's 400. It's got to be better than 320, right? But it's not even the right form. So it's not going to do much for you. Or worse, an ingredient that showed 200 milligrams in the research was effective, and somebody put in 20. And you're like, oh, well, is that going to do anything? Answer is, don't know. There's no research to show it, whether it would or wouldn't. But so to me, it's become an educated consumer. All right. If you're not educated on that, go to somebody who is educated on that and get some advice, because you got to make sure in the first instance that you're taking something that has in it what it's supposed to have at the levels that it's supposed to have them to be effective. And one of the problems that occurs is in our industry, we have a tendency to use a lot of proprietary blends. So you look on a label, it'll say proprietary blend. All right. It doesn't mean that the proprietary blend is necessarily bad. It just means you can't tell. So if a proprietary blend says this has 500 milligrams of all these different things, then you got to say, well, does it have enough of any one of them to do anything? If the first, but it is listed in order of prominence, so you look at the first ingredient. If the first ingredient is something that's been shown to be effective at 600 milligrams and all you have is 500 milligrams of stuff, you know it's not good. Otherwise, it can be hard to tell with proprietary blends. So I tend to steer clear of products with a lot of proprietary blends that don't tell me what they have in there, unless they got enough of other stuff in there that I'm not concerned about their window dressing of proprietary blends. So that's one of the things. And the other one is just look at the company itself. How long has it been around? Does it tend to be a respected company? Look at those things. There's a lot to be said for dealing with a brand that is established and is doing things right.
Yeah, I think that's really important. You touched on really like branded versus non-branded, and that tends to, from a marketing perspective, it can be useful for a company to go down that path. But I think it makes it even. I would couple. I'm just kind of brainstorming. I would couple. Hey, if they've got a proprietary brand, that's not a deal breaker, right? But I'd want, if they have a proprietary blend, I'd want them to have a lot of history in the industry, right? So then they've got this reputation, then they've got this ongoing process. And you did focus on quantities. How important is it that quantity matches, right? So yeah, we're looking at the results, and you were talking, very specifically about, I think 370 or maybe it was 320 of saw palmetto extract, right? But what if something has well, there's a couple solutions here, right? What if it's only 150 milligrams, and okay, one double it up? Like, what do you think about taking less of something, and how do you manage that?
So, can taking less of something, less than shown in a study, be effective? The answer is maybe, maybe not. We don't know. Unless there's some data to support it, it's a crapshoot. If you're taking it on faith, well, again, I think faith is a really good thing in religion. But in science, you don't do it on faith. You do it on the data. So there's either data that's showing that's effective or it's not. Some people will say, well, it's synergistic potentiation. If you use less of this and less of this and less of this, but you're using them together, they will potentiate one another. And great, show me the study that found that those three things at lesser amounts. If you don't have it, it's just not there. I don't care if you want to take some at a lesser amount. That's fine. But if you expect to get the results that you want at a lesser amount, there's just no data indicating that that'll happen. So if that's how you want to spend your money, hey, it's a free country. But I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, so that one of the conversations that I had, I think it was yesterday, talked about there's a particular drug that if you're below this particular threshold, really nothing happens. If you're in the threshold, it's actually some good results, and if you're above, actually detrimental things happen. So there are situations where, and you may not just know, it may be 150 of saw palmetto extract is almost as efficacious because maybe there is or isn't data, or that it does absolutely nothing, right? So if you want to make the educated decision, then you want to stick with what's been used in the research.
What you say is a very good point. I'll give you an example of something. So beta carotene has been shown to have photoprotective qualities. So that means it's been shown to help reduce UV damage of sun rays to skin in terms of, creating wrinkles and aging the skin. Now, in a research study, 30 milligrams was used in one group and 90 milligrams was used in the other. At 30 milligrams, it was found to be very effective for this purpose. At 90 milligrams, it was not. You think, what? But you've used more. Yeah, but more isn't always better. Sometimes you have a bell-shaped curve. Too little doesn't do it. This amount is great. More than that isn't. So more isn't always better. Better is to stick with the amount shown to be effective.
And
so I like
And we're talking about ingredients. Talk a little bit about your opinion on synthetic ingredients as opposed to natural ingredients, and some of that may even have to do with just the definition.
Yeah. So let's start out with the fact: do synthetic ingredients work as well as natural, or vice versa? And the answer is there's no one answer that there's no one size fits all for all of these things, because there's plenty of ingredients that have had research on them in their synthetic form and shown to be really effective. But let's talk about the definition first. In its strictest form, the definition of natural is that nutrient is present in that food or that plant, all right, and you're extracting it, and so it's from that natural source, okay? Now, on the other hand, you could have something that you're using as a starting source, but it is not something that actually contains it. For example, vitamin D3, known to be more effective than vitamin D2, is commercially derived from lanolin from sheep's wool. Does that mean lanolin contains D? It does not. That lanolin is used as a material in the lab. It goes through a multi-step synthetic process, and at the end of it, it comes out vitamin D3. Okay? Is that natural? Well, it started with lanolin, so does that make it natural? But there was no vitamin D in it. It had to go through a multi-step synthetic process. So most people would say, well, no, that's not really natural. That's synthetic. But does it work? Yeah, works great. But it's not natural. And if you want, nor is it vegan if you want a vegan source. So then you use other sources. Nutriland USA has a plant-based source. Yeah. But, so let's start with that. In some cases, the natural forms are better. It's been very well established that natural vitamin E is more active in the body than synthetic vitamin E. There's just no question about it. It's in the literature. Nobody denies that, except people who are not scientists or never read the studies. And by the way, I see scientists sometimes that make definitive statements never having read the research. I had one recently post on...
My son does that all the time, by the way.
Definitive
statements. He's 13.
Oh, well, he can be forgiven at 13. But I had a PhD scientist who posted on LinkedIn recently, and I was talking about, hey, we had this... I was thanking one of the magazines for writing an article on our tomato-based melatonin material. And some PhD guy comes on, melatonin's a hormone. You know, you take hormones, it's not good for you, it's going to stop your body making it, blah, 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 blah. To which I replied, yeah, I've heard this before. However, all the studies that have been done looking at this have found that definitively taking melatonin as a supplement will in no way reduce your body's own production of melatonin. It's regulated by light-dark cycles and not impacted by the consumption of melatonin. You can make the same article for the same argument for vitamin D. Vitamin D is both a nutrient and a hormone, but taking it doesn't have a negative impact on your body. So his argument didn't have science to support it. And so the answer is it depends on it. Like, for example, you mentioned our Miracell rice polyamine material that contains spermidine, which has great properties, does wonderful things, helps with hair, helps with autophagy, helps with cognitive function and all that. Well, research indicates that if you use a naturally derived one, the naturally derived one has not only spermidine, but other naturally occurring polyamines with it. The significance of which is those polyamines, when they enter the body can convert it into spermidine. So you actually end up getting more spermidine than you would if you used a synthetic spermidine. Because synthetic spermidine, all you get is the synthetic. The natural, you get all the naturally occurring spermidine plus what the body will convert into spermidine. So it's a step above. And there's others like for example, I mentioned a plant-based melatonin. There are compounds found in some of the plant-based melatonins that are really, really good for you and do very, very positive things and can improve the overall efficacy of the melatonin itself. Whereas all the other melatonin on the market is synthetic, still works, but it doesn't have those same benefits. Okay, so as a rule of thumb, I like to get something in a natural state if it's available. But let's be frank, I'm going to say something that a lot of people probably want to shoot me when I say it because they don't want people to know. Basically, most of your B vitamins are synthetic. That's how they're produced. It's not bad. You know, vitamin C, ascorbic acid, it's synthetically produced. But wait a minute, it's from corn. No, it's corn syrup, which doesn't contain C, and it goes through a multi-step synthetic process in the lab to create ascorbic acid. It's not a bad thing. All right. Should you use a natural form? You certainly can. There are some out there. A lot more expensive, but hey, natural is been in the food supply for eons, and we know that it's safe and effective. So, that would be my answer, my long-winded answer to your short question.
No, I like it. And you started talking about, I think it was vitamin A that you said synthetic versions don't work as well. Was it vitamin A?
I was talking about vitamin E.
So vitamin E. As a scientist, I look at it and go, well, if it's the exact same molecular shape, right? If it and this is where you get into really interesting, twisty, literally right-handy, left-handy kind of situations. Yeah. Organic chemistry has right-handed molecules and left-handed molecules. I think I'm using that the concept's right, but the terminology might be wrong. And those can have actually different impacts. So they can be the exact same formula, but they actually have a different structure.
Formula. Say that again. One can be a stereoisomer of the other. That is, one could be it's like a mirror image of it. Okay, so it's a left-handed versus right-handed molecule. In the case of vitamin D, D alpha, the dextro, is like the right-handed one, if you will. That one works better. Your synthetic is actually a mixture of synthetic and natural. It's DL alpha. And so it's a blend of those two. And even at a blend, it doesn't work as well. So
perfect. So that puts me in a right place, because I talk about, our molecule is naturally occurring, comes, you can collect it in the soot of a candle. And it really is 60 atoms only of carbon. And so a natural one really is the same as an organic one. I mean, as a one made in our reactor. Although by definition, it's synthetic, it really is the same. And I think the same would be true if you had a synthetic, alpha. If you're making D alpha, then it's going to have the same impact in the body. The problem is that you're not making D alpha, you're making some DLs, and that's the actual problem. Did I say that well?
Yeah, you're making an L alpha, and then you're blending it with some D to make DL. So yes, that is a very good representation of what we've been discussing, and okay. It makes a great deal of sense. And I personally take as many natural as I can, and I take some synthetic as well.
Well, and you've got the chemistry background. You might be able to dig in. Obviously, like most people don't know the difference between, the DL alpha and the D alpha. But to go like, this is a little different. Same formula, but, there's room for really structurally different molecules.
Correct.
Yeah. So I've got one last question and then some wrap-up questions. What do you think about buying supplements on Amazon, or maybe more specifically using the rating of supplements on Amazon?
So I'm not going to be incredibly popular for saying this, but you asked.
Yes.
Right. Here's the deal. I have issues with Amazon. Let me tell you what they are. Amazon has put some very stringent quality standards in place, which at a high level seems like a good thing. Oh, brand, you want to go on our product? You want to go on our website? You want to sell your stuff? You have to show testing was done. You have to show all of this stuff. And that sounds good. But they don't hold themselves to the same standards. What do I mean? All right. You want to sell your stuff, your supplements on Amazon. The supplements are not stored in an air-conditioned warehouse. They're stored in a non-air-conditioned warehouse. You have to sign a document saying that your supplement will withstand 155 degrees temperature for extended periods of time. All right. Now, most people don't actually test their supplements to see that. They'll say, yeah, ours will. Yeah. And so that allows Amazon to wash their hands of it and say, we did the right thing. They said it was, But here's the deal. If they gave a crap, they would say, oh, I'm going to store this in an air-conditioned warehouse because we know that there are nutrients that are heat sensitive. And if they're exposed to heat for a long period of time, they're going to be reduced. So if somebody takes something from the Amazon, buys something from the Amazon warehouse and tests it, and it tests out at a lower level, Amazon could just blame the brand owner. Well, you didn't put everything in there. You didn't do it right. Where the truth is, or the brand owner says, yes, I did. Like, here's all the stuff I provided you with. They go, well, but you said it would be fine at 155 and it wasn't, so it's still your fault. And so that bothers me. Now, caveat, because you buy it from Amazon doesn't mean it's in the Amazon warehouse. You can buy it from a third-party provider who keeps it in their warehouse and sells it through Amazon. If that was the case, I don't have a problem with it. But I personally would not buy mine from there because I don't know. If it was at a time of the year where it didn't get hot, then I might feel a little more comfortable with it, but it makes me very nervous. So that's my position on Amazon. But if you're looking at ratings on Amazon, I know a lot of people look at the ratings on Amazon to get a sense of what's popular and what's not. Sure, Amazon's the number one retail seller of supplements. So sure, it's a good place to look and say, what's popular and what's not.
One of the things that I've said about the Amazon rating system is like, what does a 5-star rating of, I use the example of vitamin C actually mean, right? And there's things that we know it doesn't mean, and some of them are pretty simple, right? So it doesn't mean that they weighed each tablet and it weighed 1 gram, right? It certainly doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that they crushed it up and then threw it in an HPLC to test if it was ascorbic acid, right? Like that, it definitely doesn't mean that. It probably doesn't even mean they counted the 90 capsules, right? Like the reality is it's, I kind of facetiously and tongue in cheek, it's like, well, really Amazon harassed them enough before they died to leave a 5-star review. So, and frankly, in the case of like a vitamin C, a lot of the reviews are going to be related to shipping, which, are just unrelated to the actual product. So I think the same rigor that you want to put into your supplements in general, you really want to stay in that space. And frankly, I think not include Amazon 5-star ratings as an assessment of the potential impact that this is going to have in your life.
The only way I would use Amazon is somebody says, let's say somebody's trying to do market research, and they go in and they say, well, what are the best sellers in this category on Amazon?
What's popular? Yes,
that's the only way I'd use it. I wouldn't even consider the Amazon's rating system to be something of value to me.
And I think it's very useful, like on a cell phone or on headphones or whatever. Like they work, and that's good. When you throw it into the supplement space, it's just not a useful thing to go by. Well, this is amazing. I have some wrap-up questions. The first wrap-up question is, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
So, my mother is turning 91 in December. She's in good health, and I'm pretty pleased with that. And I consider her very likely to live to be 100.
Wow.
So what do I think is a target? I'd be happy with where my mother is right now, let alone where she's going to be. But what's more important to me than the fact that my mother is 91 is that she has a quality of life. I'd rather have a quality of life for as long as possible than just live longer. Because if your quality of life sucks, if you're dealing with disease states that make you miserable, you're in constant pain, all these things are going on, then living longer isn't necessarily something that's as appealing.
Yeah.
But if you can have a good health span as well as a good lifespan, to me, that's what it's all about.
That makes sense. So this is a longevity summit. Dr. David Sinclair, with his book, Lifespan, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to, talks about potentially the information theory of aging and potentially being able to pull levers and live infinitely. Where do you sit on that? How old do you think humans can get to?
I think that, I had in graduate school, had a really interesting course on the biology of human aging. And it looked at a lot of the different theories of aging, why people age and what that's about. And there are things that I think we can do that help us to live longer, healthier lives. I don't think that the science is such where we're going to live to be any age, like infinite. One of the reasons are something as simple as telomeres. Telomeres are stretches of DNA at the end of chromosomes. And those stretches of DNA they're sacrificial DNA. When a cell divides, it cuts off a little tiny pieces of these telomeres. And that's good. It's sacrificial. It doesn't have genetic information in it. But without being able to do that, the cells won't be able to divide. So there's nutrients you can take, dietary practices you can follow, things you can do that may help extend telomere length, but not indefinitely. It just slows down the reduction of the telomere. Yeah. Eventually, you'll get to a point where there's not enough left for the cell to divide, and that's when we start, moving into the next step in our personal evolution.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. All right. What 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts, because everybody likes shortcuts, for longevity and a long health span would you share?
First and foremost, diet. If I had to say just one practice that would be the best thing you could do for your diet, it would be eat plenty of vegetables. If you did nothing else but that, you would do so much to help the overall quality of your diet and the impact it can have on your lifespan. So that's one thing. Yes, there's many things you can do with your diet, but just try to make it simple. That one thing is huge. So that's one area. Another area is some kind of stress relief practice. It could be, for different people, it's different things. It could be meditation. It could be yoga. It could just be taking a walk in nature and making some time for yourself that isn't related to work or family so that you can have some space to de-stress. That would be another area. Exercise of some sort of exercise that you can do. What's the best one to do? The best one to do is the one that you'll do regularly. That's the best one. And finally, using some good supplements. If you use the right kind of supplements, it can have a very positive impact on your health and potentially your longevity.
Excellent. Gene, how can people contact you?
If they'd like to contact me, they can contact me at gene.bruno@nutralandusa.com. Nutraland is Nutra land, USA.com.
Excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
I'm excited about the next study that's published and the next one after that. I spend a lot of time reading studies, and I'm like a kid at Christmas. I get really excited when I read something that's new and interesting. Recently, I was going through some of the raw material lists of products that my company sells, and one of them was calcium folinate, a natural form of folate. And I was just digging into the research studies out there, and I discovered multiple human clinical studies on this stuff for autism spectrum disorder. Having a son that's on the autism spectrum, it was really exciting for me to see it. It's some of the best research I've ever seen on any nutraceutical. Oh, I got so excited, I quickly wrote an article. So it's just like whatever, I get excited about whatever's next, whatever the new research is, or old research I haven't seen before. That's what excites me.
That's very cool. All right. So you can reach him, Gene.Bruno, that's GENE.Bruno, BRUNO, at Nutraland. Wait, what is it? Let me make sure. What is it again?
NUTRA, Nutraland, USA.com.
Nutralandusa.com. This has been such a great conversation. Gene, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Chris.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.